of the business sessions that is in store for all of you today as well as tomorrow. We all believe that, of course, the convention theme being on the customs broker, new paradigm, new opportunities, new league. Before we begin with the business sessions, once again, I'd like to humbly put down the house rules. During the sessions, we would request all of you to please keep your mobiles in the silent mode. This is to avoid any kind of interruption during the business sessions. Also, as we have all taken a look at the schedule, it is very dense, which is why we request all of you to please be on time, whether during the sessions or even after the tea and the lunch breaks. We request you to please comply with these rules so that we can go ahead with the sessions on time. And we also request all our speakers and all our delegates to adhere to the timeline. So ladies and gentlemen, let's now begin with the inauguration of the business session. We are again joined by our honorable dignitaries. May I please request our dignitaries to please step forward to inaugurate the business session by lighting the auspicious lamp. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to invite our honorable dignitaries to please come on the dais and take seats. Before we begin with the inauguration of the business session, we'd like to honor our dignitaries, and I now request Mr. Shantanu Bhadkamkar to welcome Mrs. Shobha Chary, our chief guest for the day, with the bouquet as well as the memento. Let's have a warm round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we now welcome our chief guest for the day, Mrs. Shobha Chary, Member, Personnel and Vigilance. May I now request Mr. Dushyant Mulani to present the bouquet, the Taj plaque, as well as the memento to welcome and honor Mr. Yashodhan Parande, Member Authority for Advanced Ruling. Let's have a warm round of applause as we welcome today Mr. Yashodhan Parande. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now request Mr. Debashish Dutta to welcome by presenting the bouquet and the Taj plaque as well as the memento to Mr. Sankalpa Bhattacharjya, the director of KPMG India. May I request all of you to please join in welcoming Mr. Sankalpa Bhattacharjya, director, KPMG India. And ladies and gentlemen, we are also delighted to have the presence of Nita Lal Budalia, Commissioner of Customs Imports at Air Cargo, New Delhi. May I now request Mr. Shankar Shinde to present the bouquet, the Taj plaque, and the memento to welcome Nita Lal Budalia. Let's have another huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So on that beautiful note, it's now time to introduce to all of you on the theme. I'd now like to invite Mr. Shantanu Bhadkamkar to present the theme introduction to the August gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Shantanu Bhadkamkar, Chairman, FFFAI.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your punctuality yesterday evening, but I would say today also we have a dense schedule, so please be on time so that you can make the best of the business sessions. We construct business sessions with lot of consultative process. We float an idea. There is a thought. Ideas are exchanged. Then we conceptualize. We get feedback from members, previous delegates, professionals, including big professional consultancy firms, enlightened officers, colleagues. We come out with a theme, then we come out with a theme paper, then we look for topics, and every single thing is aligned to us, either as a technical issue, or as our business issue, or in knowledge sessions we take our personal life issues and family issues. Our change from custom house agent to custom broker won't be in semantics. The world is very changing fast. In fact, with lot of multilateral agreements, in most countries, custom duty is one of the smallest issue that is handled by customs administration. The duty rates are, as it is, very low nowadays, and they are going even lower, or they reach zero level. As these things change, our traditional skills of understanding import policy, understanding custom tariff, are not valued as much by the customers as they used to be in the past. Naturally, we need new skill sets for development. In fact, today when we really take a look, we find KYC or suspension of license as very serious issues. But numerically, if we see, we are scared of it or worried of it because it's a blind spot. We don't know when it will come. We don't know when it can hurt us. But 90% of challenges we face as CHAs are commercial, have to do with our business issues, our HR issues, our finance issues, our management issues. So we need focus on those issues also equally. If we take count of the business sessions we had for last 10 or 12 years, in Hyderabad we touched customs and such areas much less. Then we went into door-to-door multimodalism, and again we have taken a full turn, and this time we are focusing on customs a lot more. Because we have seen a lot of changes happening in customs with AEO. System assessment has changed into self-assessment. AEO will be followed by MRA. KYC we have concerns. Globally, customs is changing a lot, so we have kept a session of IFCBA. You will know what happens in USA, what happens in Canada, what happens perhaps in Nigeria and Angola also. Our colleagues are here, we can find out. Essentially now, we all like stability. We resist change. But it is change and adversity that brings opportunities. It creates a platform for growth and progress. If we look back 20 years back, when liberalization started in 1991, we all felt very bad about it. But in 20 years, our living standards, the numbers we say, the numbers we count today in our industry or any other industry have reached such a level that let alone we expecting those numbers, we would not have dreamed of such numbers in 1989, in the pre-liberalization era. As a result, we have to admit that change is inevitable, and much as inevitable, we should embrace it happily and make best of it. All the business sessions now we have structured have a flow. We will start with the first session, which is inaugural session also, and we are really fortunate to have Mr. Yashodhan Parande, Mrs. Shobha Chary, Mrs. Nitalal Budalia. All of them are well-known personalities in our industry. And Mr. Parande would also be making a presentation on advanced ruling authority and how perhaps it applies to Indian environment also, which is a much less known fact by people. In second business session, we will focus on international trade compliance and we will be talking on governance. Next session we will talk, it is a panel discussion by IFCBA and it will speak about initiatives of World Customs Organization, a global review of custom brokers regulations, private sector consultative group and what is being done in private sector consultative group of World Customs Organization. Then we go for how we can make best by, in a session, custom broker, a false multiplier, new growth. So now that new opportunities, new changes are coming up, how do we make best out of it? Eventually, in fact, quite often we wonder when we discuss amongst friends and colleagues, are we a custom broker or we are in finance business? Most customers expect us to be their financiers. So we will deal about business prudence and finance angles in that. In the fifth business session, after concluding it, we have today one knowledge session and tomorrow one knowledge session. And knowledge sessions are open for families and all others. They are not restricted to delegates. The knowledge session we have today is on power of vision. In day-to-day business, we face stiff competition. And one of the reasons of such competition is undifferentiated service offering. If each one of us are offering the same service in the same manner, naturally it gets commoditized. And something which is commoditized, we say that it is market forces prevail, but in reality, in a fragmented business such as us, it's not market forces, it's really the attrition war which prevails. It's not customer making us compete, but we are each other pulling down. And monopolies are now things of past. Even cartelization are thing of past. The way we can overcome all these things is essentially by having foresight. And some of our colleagues have shown tremendous foresight. So Mr. Adil Malia is a good speaker. He is HR head of SR Group. He is a very eminent speaker and he will give us examples of vision, why vision, how we should carry out our vision. Second knowledge session is tomorrow. While discussion we found what we have given as basic premise for our convention theme is we fight, in fact even in our federation and associations we discuss that all our time is spent in fighting wars which are not our battles. We are fighting customers' battles all the time. While doing so, we forget to take care of our business and if we forget to take care of something else, which is our family, we fail to take care of our family welfare also. So this session will focus on protection of family wealth, and he will come out with various options, and there are a lot of things which we have not thought about at all that he will come. And we have two very eminent panelists on that. There would be a couple of cases presented, and then a structured approach will be given to you. So please take this opportunity, stretch yourself for 2 days. It's once in 2 years opportunity for all of us, and take all the very best out of it. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to see you in all business sessions in full numbers. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, sir, for setting the tone for the business sessions that are about to follow in few hours. Ladies and gentlemen, on that beautiful note, I now like to invite Mr. Sankalpa Bhattacharjya, Director, KPMG India, to present the State of Industry Report. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sankalpa Bhattacharjya.
We are partnered with KPMG.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm audible all the way through to the back. It's a pleasure being here among you, and I always get caught up in a bit of controversy because of the nature of the discussion that we indulge in, especially around something as diverse as logistics and something as specific as customs brokerage. So in my presentation today, I want to cover 3 aspects. The first aspect is really about 2 or 3 macro messages about the logistics industry and how it's changing. Why logistics? Because I think customs brokerage is one aspect of logistics itself. So it's important to understand how that business is shifting and how it's impacting your individual business. I want to spend a few minutes on the current state of the customs brokerage business, purely from a market overview perspective and how outsiders would look at this business. And then I'll conclude with some questions which really you need to take back and think about in the next 5 years on where your business will be heading in that time frame. But before I begin, I often repeat a joke at these forums, which is the state of the logistics industry. And just to cheer the mood up here, we often hear these definitions of fancy logistics companies in India. So in discussion with some of my clients, we came out with this definition that someone with an empty basement is a warehousing solutions provider. Someone with 2 trucks is a 3PL company, and someone with a telephone line is a freight forwarder. And it's often true. I'll cover the diversity of this business a little later in my presentation. But just to start with the logistics industry and how it's changed in the last 10 odd years. And India is indeed one of 5 privileged nations to be at the cusp of a massive change in the way logistics is done in the country. Why do I say that? Because it's in the middle of its evolution towards an evolved logistics system, and it's one of 5 countries which have a GDP of greater than $600 billion. How does this make a difference? In context, in the year 2000, India's GDP was $450 billion US dollars. Today, India's GDP is $2 trillion. The extent of imports in India today exceeds the entire GDP of India just 13 years back. That's the rate of growth that we're talking about. So 7% growth from 2000 to 2013 annualized. But what's interesting is if you look at the per capita GDP or income, in the year 2000, on average, a person earned 22,000 rupees per annum. Today, on average, a person earns 80,000 rupees. That is 12% compared to GDP growth. I'll talk about the implications of this a little later. But I think, just to summarize, it's a huge opportunity. Things are changing very dramatically in the logistics space, and you should be aware of some of these changes. The three key changes that I want to leave you with are PVR, not the movie chain, but P basically for polarization, because the industry is rapidly getting segmented into 2 or 3 parts: the large companies and the international players and everybody else. You've seen in the last 10 to 12 years the amount of M&A and Indian companies getting acquired by international companies, MNCs coming into India. That trend will continue. And I've seen this, most of my clients are MNCs and Indian companies, and they have very grand plans of taking India to the next level, which is really the top right quadrant. So you will see more MNCs coming into India. They will bring in international standards. That's something which you need to think about. The second is the V part of it, verticalization. I think gone are the days when you can be a generalist in the logistics space. The future will belong to specialists or industry vertical specialists. The third is really reorganization, both in terms of things like modal mix, so the move from road to rail, coastal and other means of transportation, and also the way in which business and logistics is getting disaggregated. You earlier had hubs of logistics. Today, logistics is much more dispersed. So PVR, I think, are going to be 3 trends which define business across multiple segments of logistics. So with that, I want to kind of stress on customs brokerage itself. As you will see, it's a large industry in India. If you look at gross revenue terms, which includes the value of duties and the pass-through revenues, it's a $7 billion US industry with a net of $500 million. So if you remove the value of the freight, that's what you're left with. And if you look at the growth historically for the customs brokerage industry and the growth going forward, broadly it's in the 15% range. Differing rates of growth between air and ocean. And again, on a historical and going forward basis, both of these have grown at different rates. What's interesting is also the mix between import and export within air and ocean, which is also changing. And that's also to do with the nature of business that's changing in India. Just to give you a sense of that, the share of agriculture in India when we gained independence was greater than 60%. Today, agriculture share in GDP is 17%. And can you imagine what percentage of our population is involved in generating that 17% of our GDP? 52%. So there's a massive shift that's going to take place going forward, which you need to be prepared for, both in terms of EXIM trends and what goes into that EXIM. This is a funny chart because it really splits the competitive landscape in the customs brokerage industry. And you will see that 95% of companies or customs brokers in India are what we call minnows. These are companies with less than 20 crores in top line gross revenue turnover. Now, what does this really say? That any industry which has such a structure essentially says that 2 things. 1, the barriers to entry are extremely low in an industry like this. And 2, this industry has to consolidate because there's no way you can continue to be competitive and make margins. Something has to change. So what is driving the change? What is driving really some of your pain points? And this is actually based on a short survey that KPMG carried out last year among some of you sitting in this room on what really troubles you, what do you think about the industry. And Mr. Bhadkamkar spoke about KYC. I think that's on top of everybody's mind. How do we deal with this new animal? I think this new animal is not going to go away. It's there in every industry today. The world is a very different place from what it was 10 years ago. And if you look at how banking has changed through KYC, I think it's only natural that safety and safeguards have to come in. Now, how do you deal with it? How is it implemented is a different matter. Corruption. Now, we keep talking about this at a pan-India level, and this is not to berate government or the public sector, it's equally rampant in the private sector. If you look at a purchasing manager for a contract, a new contract, there is speed money to be paid. So this has to be eliminated. We've actually done an estimation of the cost of speed money. It's basically 500 rupees of corruption per TEU in India. That is massive. If you add up the number of TEUs moving around India, 500 rupees times that, you can imagine. Poor infrastructure is not new to any of you. Most of our ports are in a sorry state today. There are new private ports which are coming up, which are also plagued with a number of issues like rail and road connectivity. And IT systems are still pretty ineffective. Certainly there's no talking between IT systems in a port, in a CFS, in a transporter's office, in a warehouse. Processes are inefficient. We all know about the time it takes to clear cargo, the number of feet on street you need to have as customs brokers just to clear cargo, push papers from one desk to the other. That's reduced significantly, but there is still a lot of paperwork happening. In theory, there should be no one sitting at an airport or a port simply to clear cargo. It should all happen electronically. Which brings me to a point later on that what do you do if your business can be put at the end of a wire? Competitive intensity I talked about, and this has really resulted in a huge amount of price undercutting. You would have seen your own margins erode very significantly over the years, and that's because there's nothing to differentiate in this business. The customs brokerage industry was born out of information asymmetry. There was a customer who did not have knowledge and information, and there was someone who had that information and was charging a fee for it. What happens when all of that information is made available to this customer? He starts valuing this intermediary even lesser, and that's exactly what is happening. Your business is moving into a wire in an electronic space, and 5 years down the line, this industry will look very different. Now, we've looked at the logistics industry as a kind of curve. There are always new emerging segments within logistics, which we call the ascendants. So you would have, some of these you would have read about in the press, coastal shipping, free trade warehousing zones, liquid logistics. These are all the new upcoming industries. In a time span of 3 years, they get mature. They start becoming fads, and then they start declining. We've seen that happen to project logistics with infrastructure and power projects slowing down. We've seen that happening in the container rail industry because of regulatory issues. We've seen that happening in cold storage. For the last decade, most cold storages in India were struggling to survive, and yet that was seen as the game changer in Indian logistics. You then have a number of sectors which go through a growth or a revival cycle. We're seeing that happening with transportation. Freight forwarding is also a very cyclical industry. You have mature segments, for example, container freight stations or primary transport, which is one of the oldest industries in logistics. And then you have industries which go into a decline, which essentially is the customs brokerage space. Now, what do industries in a maturity or decline phase need to do? They need to radically reinvent their business models. I'll talk about what those potential models could be, or they need to give way to the future. And this is not just a consultant's view. This is the view that some of you sitting in this room had in the survey that we did last year. Customers need end-to-end solutions, and customs brokers are critical links in the current context. We have a 65% customer overlap between our customs brokers and freight forwarding business today. However, there is very little hope for standalone customs brokers to survive. Customs brokers in India are surviving because of the inefficient way in which customs is managed. In 5 years, there will be no need for a customs broker. That's a very powerful statement. In fact, 60% of the respondents said that this industry, which you are part of, will cease to exist in 5 years in a standalone form. Progression for a customer is freight forwarder, then customs broker, then contract logistics. Our customers are asking for freight forwarding and customs brokerage services as a bundle. Customs brokerage is not a significant revenue earner. And there are